Welcome to Car VR. I'm your host, Andrew Escobar, and you are riding shotgun in the 2003 Mitsubishi Outlander LS front-wheel drive. So why are we reviewing an old Outlander? Well, to start out the series of riding shotgun, we're going to be talking about my daily driver, which seems appropriate. The Outlander was released into the US market in 2003 and came in two different trim levels. The lower trim level being the LS and the higher trim level being the XLS. Both variants came in either front-wheel drive or four-wheel drive. Regardless of what version you got, under the hood, there would be a 2.4-liter naturally aspirated single overhead cam engine that produced about 140 horsepower mated to a 4-speed automatic transmission that also has the ability to pop it into sequential shifting mode. Now that we have all the technical details out of the way for the moment, let's go for a ride, huh? So, here's the thing about this particular vehicle. It's only been owned by one family, mine. When I was young, my family purchased this vehicle as a good grocery getter, and eventually, when I became of age to get my driver's license, the car was passed down to me, and I've been driving it ever since. Now, that was a number of years ago, and I still drive it to this day, and I don't really feel like changing over to another vehicle because it feels so comfortable to just use the same thing over and over. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, you get used to what you have, and there's certainly a lot to get used to with this vehicle. There's a lot of different quirks. For instance, there's no ABS, no traction control, no stability control, and heck, if you pop it into sequential shifting mode, there's not even under rev protection or over rev protection in certain gears, which means if you're going fast and you downshift accidentally, you could force the engine to go way past redline and absolutely destroy it. And here's the thing about the engine. It's an interference motor, so if everything isn't just so, the whole thing can legitimately go kablooey, which is definitely not good. We'll go into more about that in a little bit, but now sure, there's definitely a bunch of different quirks about this vehicle that make it rather odd, but some of the quirks actually feel more beneficial than they do detrimental. And one good example of that would be the brakes. Yes, they're not ABS brakes, but quite frankly, they are some of the best feeling brakes that I've used in any vehicle. Now, maybe it's because I've been driving vehicles with no ABS brakes for all my life, and switching to cars with ABS just feels weird and wrong. But here's the thing. When I push the brake pedal down on this vehicle, the distribution of power to decelerate the vehicle feels so even and smooth that it just feels right. It's one of those things that's hard to explain unless you're actually experiencing it for yourself. But I have a hard time locking up brakes on this vehicle. Even when I slam it hard, it never seems to lock up. It gives a nice, even, linear performance in terms of its deceleration that I haven't experienced on other vehicles. At least none of them do it quite as well as what I feel they do in this one. And it's not like this car was meant to be a performance vehicle of any sort. It just happens to be what it is. But some of the other things, like the no stability control and no traction control, etc., can be very detrimental in the winter. See, here in Illinois, the summer, well, it's easy driving, sure. But in the winter, snowfall can come out of nowhere, and without the proper tires, you might be up a creek. You see, this car really does not know the difference between road conditions. You genuinely have to work with the car and kind of beg it to just work in the winter. Now, here's the thing. I have two sets of wheels for this car because of this issue. One set of wheels are for the summertime. They're all seasons. And the other set of wheels are for the winter time. They are strictly winter tires. And there's a big difference between summer and winter tires. Winter tires, the way the rubber compound is made, it doesn't require friction in order to create grip. Whereas summer tires, especially slicks and stuff like that, yeah, you'd have to create friction. All seasons are a little different. They should get grip all year round, regardless of the surface, but it won't be as good on a per situation basis. And that's why I switch over the winter tires as soon as I know there's going to be snow within the week. Because otherwise, you'll be spinning your gears and your tires, and yeah, it's very easy to slide in this car. You know, it's front-wheel drive, not all-wheel drive, so getting a good start on acceleration can also be a bit of a pain in the tuchus as well in less than optimal conditions. But so long as the road is dry, this thing handles and drives pretty darn well. Its weight is only about 1.5 short tons, which, convert that to whatever measurement you're used to, wherever you're from. And that's not half bad. I mean, yes, this car is made of mostly stamped metal. It's very thin. Because of that, the car drive can be a little noisy. But if you can get past that, the reduction in weight compared to other vehicles in this class during the year that this was made, well, reducing weight helps all around with performance in almost every category. When you're braking harder, there's less to stop the momentum, or less, force needed to stop the momentum of moving forward. When you're accelerating, there's less work needed to go forward. When you're turning, the grip is better because you're not going in one direction as hard if you can, reduce the amount of weight. And you can definitely feel that because I personally use this vehicle as a little bit of an amateur rally kind of thing. And yeah, obviously there's no rally equipment in this vehicle, sure. This was on a private track. It was about 1.5 miles long. And yeah, because of that, I didn't really have the safety equipment. But I can tell you from experience, this thing can do a rally track 24/7, all day, every day. And man, I was brutal with this car. 60 miles an hour off-road on the rally track is not something to take lightly, especially in a little four-banger front-wheel drive that was never meant for that purpose. But one of the things about this vehicle is the fact that it has a lot of suspension travel. If you look at modern variants of even the Outlander, they've reduced the amount of suspension travel because they realized, people aren't taking this vehicle off-road like we more or less intended. They're driving it to get groceries and, go to work and stuff. So they kind of got rid of that thing thinking it wasn't a necessity. And that bums me out because one of the great things about this car was its independent suspension that really allowed you to go fast on uneven surfaces, even if it's just front-wheel drive, and maintain those speeds and feel comfortable doing it. That's why I like this car. It's unintentionally fun. That's why I don't plan on getting rid of it anytime soon either. And I'm sitting at 130,848 miles on the odometer. And I plan on making sure it lasts far past 200,000, and that means doing the scheduled maintenance. That brings us to our next topic of discussion. So when it comes time to get this car serviced and fixed and maintained, like you will have to with any vehicle, especially high mileage vehicles, you're going to run into a few problems. First one being a lot of the parts are OEM parts only. There are no aftermarket support for certain things. Here are some examples from my own experience. The eccentric bolts for the lateral link arms to control the camber of the rear wheels. The circular retainer lock to keep your headlights connected into the housing so that it doesn't fall out. Things like that. The little things that on most vehicles have aftermarket support, generally from brands like Dorman and, there's a lot of different aftermarket brands. But the point is, there's just nothing for Mitsubishi. If you have an American vehicle, it's almost guaranteed there's aftermarket support for it somewhere. And even on newer foreign cars, there's plenty of aftermarket support, but this particular vehicle, for some reason, they really shaft you on parts. And look, I've looked around in junkyards. Finding an Outlander of any sort or variant is very difficult. Most of them that have been purchased are still on the road today. So that makes it very hard to go into a junkyard and find parts, because in my area, within like 50, 60 miles of where I live, there's only maybe 1 or 2 Outlanders in any of the junkyards, which means it's very difficult to get these parts if I don't want to go through the manufacturer. Because, I can go into a junkyard and pick the parts that I need if I'm lucky, but the problem is, because everyone still has their Outlander, and there are so few of them that have actually been totaled and scrapped and put into scrap yards, that whenever one comes into the scrap yard, it's almost inevitably picked clean the first day, which is terrible for people like myself who want to keep this going. So there's been times where I've had to pony up 4 bolts, a washer, 2 washers, and a nut for the lateral link arms in the back of this vehicle. It was about $80. Yeah, that's a lot for some bolts. If I wanted to get the circular retainer lock to keep my 9007 series headlights in the unit, that's another $20 per. It's just a little bit of plastic. But I guess that's their theory, supply and demand. And look, the dealer's always going to be more expensive. But generally speaking, most of the maintenance for the major parts can be done. And no, you don't have to go to the dealer repair in order to have it done. Yeah, there is a few specialty parts here and there, but overall, it's worth keeping this vehicle functional. We've gone over a few of the quirks. We've gone over the specifications of the vehicle. Now it's time to actually have fun with it. So, what we're going to do is we're going to kick it in sequential here, and we are going to try and get up to 60 miles an hour on this straightaway. Now, here's the thing. 60 miles an hour is not very fast in this car. After all, brand new, it was 140 horsepower, and we are over 130,000 miles into this car's life. This car is well over 10 years old, so you can't honestly expect it to be at peak performance, not without some good tuning and cleaning of the engine on the inside. So it's probably not really producing 140 horsepower, but fun fact, if you were to get the 2004 version instead of the 2003, the 2004 version has an extra 20 horsepower. I don't know where they pulled some wizardry out of nowhere, but they were able to squeeze 20 more horsepower out of it without sacrificing fuel economy. Oh, if only we had waited one more year. But let's try this out. We're going to spin up the torque converter just a tiny bit before we let go. And go. At 60. Quite frankly, I like the exhaust note on this car. And, you know, look, I don't have a fart can muffler on my car. This is the stock exhaust. There was an exhaust at one point, but it has been repaired. The car, it passes emissions all the time, so there's no exhaust leak. But it's still kind of loud. But as long as you enjoy the exhaust notes out of this thing, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. But just know that the acoustics of this vehicle have never been very good. Because like I said before, it is still just stamped metal, which is very thin. And yes, the thinness of the metal does allow it to be light. But it comes at a cost of acoustic quietness. But speaking of acoustics, the speakers that came in this vehicle stock are actually really good for what it's worth, even from back then. Now, the radio unit that came with it was unfortunately made at that time when cassettes were coming or being phased out, but we weren't yet at that time when MP3 players were being really, popular. So it was only a CD player with FM radio. I swapped it out for something more modern. It's a single DIN radio from Pioneer that does a little bit of everything. But if you really wanted, you could even go double DIN with this configuration. I just happen to have the second slot here on the bottom filled up with a bunch of my 12-volt accessories, my phone charger, my dash cam, a few other things here and there. And it looks like I might be stuck right here, so this might be a great time to talk about the different variants of this vehicle across the world and why it makes me sad that America got stuck with the configuration that we did. So here's the thing. In 2004, Mitsubishi's Outlander LS still had the 2.4-liter naturally aspirated engine, and it was kicking out 160 horsepower. It was still a single overhead cam. It resembled a lot to the 2003 that we're driving right now. But get this, over in Europe, in places like Russia, the Outlander had been around for, I think, a little while longer. But in 2004, they had the best configuration you could ask for a grocery getter like this. Here's the deal. It came with the same 2-liter turbo engine that was found in the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution 8. Yeah, it was kicking out 200 horsepower stock. And with a good retune, you can get pretty close to 280 horsepower out of that engine without doing too much to it. It also came in 4-wheel drive with a 5-speed manual gearbox. To those of us who really enjoy driving and not just riding in a car, that, my friends, is the proper setup. A good engine with a reputation of being very tunable. Inside of a grocery getter with a manual transmission and 4-wheel drive, the thing was a beast. It was the Outlander Turbo. The fact that the European version never made it to the United States makes me very sad, because I truly do love this car. The way it's set up, the roof racks are perfect for hauling stuff on the top. There's plenty of space in the back. You can transport a decent amount of people, 4 comfortably, 5 if you've got some skinny friends to sit in the back. Having the setup with the 2-liter turbo manual and 4-wheel drive would have been an awesome combination for a grocery getter. Quite frankly, it's still to this day a dream car of mine. A dream car that, financially speaking, is easily attainable. It's just importing it would be next to impossible with regulations and laws that that are the way they are. So, what is a guy to do but to deal with what he's got? Now, here comes the question that a lot of people want to know. Would you buy this vehicle again? Me? Oh yeah, in a heartbeat. But I would definitely opt for the four-wheel drive version because adding four-wheel drive to this vehicle only drops the miles per gallon by 1. And that's not bad. I would gladly sacrifice 1 mile per gallon to get four-wheel drive out of this thing. It would make it a lot easier to deal with in the winter. But at the end of the day, it's just a good car. The new Outlanders are a bit of a quandary. But this one's fun. Thanks for watching!